Welcome to Curator's Corner. I'm Amy Christensen, the director of the Independence Heritage Museum. Today we're going to be exploring the history of Valsetz, Oregon, a company town that no longer exists but still looms large in our local history. I'm going to be speaking with Ron Rose, who's an expert on Valsetz history. His family lived there for 3 generations. In the early 1900s, the Cobbs and Mitchell Company built the Valley and Siletz Railroad to move timber from the Coast Range to the Southern Pacific Line in Independence. Along the route, they founded the company town of Valsetz in 1919. What began as a camp for single loggers soon grew into a thriving community where families lived for generations. Ownership passed from Cobbs and Mitchell to the Valsetz Lumber Company and later to Boise Cascade. Valsetz became one of Oregon's longest-lived company towns until it was dismantled in 1984. The community of Valsetz really revolved around the mill. So what was daily life like connected to the mill, and how important was it to the existence of the community of Valsetz?
The only thing it was the mill and the logging. There was no other income up there. They built a store. The store had 3 stories. The upstairs was a theater. They had a dentist. They had a doctor in that area at the time. So the mill would be pretty well protected if anybody got hurt. There was a railroad station. There was railroad cars or motor cars that you could get on from Valsetz. At the time, they could come out to Hoskins. They could get to Independence, and then when the Independence hooked up to the railroad, you would go clear to Salem. So that was the transportation they had. My parents never had a car until the 40s. And then there was railroads in the places where they was going to log, and it was off track. I mean, they was big trains and everything else, and they would pull the logs, put it on the train, and take them down and dump them in the pond. They would sort them out, and they'd take them over to the mill. And the mill run 2 shifts right after wartime. And they said there was only about 400 or 500 people. There was 1,500 people because they had to have all the shifts on it.
And did most of the people who were working in the mill and the teachers from the school, were they living in Valsetz, or were they traveling back and forth?
No, there was quite a thing. The schoolhouse was built in 1924, and right alongside of it, it was a teacher's dorm. It was a 2-story building, and it was built in 1925. Well, over here at Monmouth, there's the normal school, and probably the first place that they would get to go to teach at was in Valsetz. The reason why that they picked it, most of them did not have cars and things, so they could get on they called it the skunk. It was a motor car. And why is it skunk? Because it stunk like a skunk because of the diesel and things on it, and it would hold probably 40 or 50 people. But anyway, they go up there, and they even had a caretaker for the teachers. They had the meals for them. They had all the provisions made for them, placed for them, and they would stay up there. Sometimes if they'd be up there, I know I had a 2nd grade teacher when I went to 2nd grade. When I graduated, she was still coming up there every year to teach school. And actually, if they were married, they had one bigger room that they had for their wives, and this gentleman ended up having twin boys up there. And anyway, that dorm stayed there until the school was tore out. And it made a lot of sense for them there to do on it.
Now, I understand as well that the whole community surrounded or focused on the mill, but I mean, there were families living up there, and you've told me some of your experiences and stories revolving around like the social part of living in Valsetz and the bowling alley. And can you tell us a little bit about what it was like to live up there and to spend your time up there?
Well, in 1939, the store had burnt down. And it was probably until 1947, right in that area, there was another gentleman that bought the company from Cobbs and Mitchell, and it happened to be Templeton Lumber Company, because he owned some other mills, and Mr. Templeton happened to be the broker for the first mill, and he was going up there in 1924. So he decided that first thing he would do would build a recreational hall. Well, the recreational hall ended up being a two-alley bowling. There was a pool hall, there was a restaurant, and there was a theater. And the theater part would usually be for theaters, it'd be for dances, it'd be for any function that was going on. It helped out the school because they had a small gym and it really done a lot of things. The next thing he probably built, I think, was probably a church up on the hill. And it was all people that lived there, and it would be any denomination because they never know who was going to be the preacher for that time, and they had a place for him to stay there. So anything that was being done around there, a lot of it, that they could add on to some of their houses because there was lumber there, and it worked out pretty well for him. And he just kept adding different things on. He added on to the mill, he added on 9 houses in back of us. We lived on Cadillac Avenue in the family and right next to the school. So there was a big hillside there, and they built 9 brand new houses for family people. And to raise on it, it was close to the school, you just walk over to it. I told the kids one time, my grandkids, that hey, I used to go to school when it was about 5-6 feet of snow and it's just colder than heck and everything else. And their grandmother says, well, ask him where he lived at. Where'd you live at, Papa? I said, right next door. I walked across the snow to school.
Well, so, I mean, this was a full community, generations of people's stories. What ultimately led to the decline of Valsetz and the closure?
They rebuilt the mill, and there was big logs. I mean, it'd be 5, 6, 7, 8 feet in diameter across it, and they were just running out of them. And they was getting down smaller and smaller and smaller. And the guy that bought the company, Mr. Templeton, in 1957, he decided he would put in a green veneer plywood mill, and what it was, right alongside the sawmill. And all they would do is peel the logs, get the veneer, stack it, and then they would ship it out. And they were starting to ship it out, a lot of it by trucks at that time, but they were still using their railroad on it. So Boise Cascade bought the same company in 1959, and he put a full-fledged plywood mill in there, presses and finished wood and everything else, and then they shut the sawmill down at that time. But they still had what they call a stud mill in the old sawmill, because their peeler cores were probably about 6 or 8 inches still in diameter. They would drop on a conveyor and go up there and it'd go through this little stud mill, and they made two-by-fours. So there's still things that was going on with that there.
Well, let me ask you this. So, what remains today of Valsetz if someone were to go back out to the former community?
Okay, it's still a gravel road out of Falls City. It might be a little blacktop a little ways up there. It's still narrow. They have straightened out some of the corners. I've been up there a few times with this Ted and things, not too long ago. You can't tell where things at. I couldn't tell where things were at. The only thing is, when we come in to Valsetz, there was just a little dip into it, and there was a creek there, and I could recognize it. And we go on down. He says, "Can you tell where you live out, Ron?" I says, "Well, we're getting closer or something." Well, with the new modern cars, and it can trace back where things were at that town. It could tell you almost wherever house was at. It could tell you the streets were in there, but by just ordinary eye, you can't tell a thing. And I said, maybe here is the main street, Cadillac, and the other one's on, go to the grocery store. He said, yeah, you're about another 100 feet down there it is. The only other thing is up there is a big concrete and part walls where they used to have a great big shop. And then about every 4 or 5 years, they let it open up for people to go back up there to camp overnight, so they can get together on it. But outside of that, you cannot tell where the mill's at. They cleaned everything out of there. And I knew where the reservoir's at for their drinking water, because there's still kind of a little cow trail up through there where the animals are going. But no, you can't tell a thing.
So one more final question for you. What What do you think is important for people to know about the community of Valsetz?
Getting back to over the years and things, they would say, hey, those people are from the hills, they're a bunch of hicks up there. But you didn't stop and realize that those hicks were supplying a lot of goods for the town and whatnot, and the timber that's coming out of there, and they supported for Independence and Hoskins and Dallas and Salem, because this was the closest thing where they spent all their money. So it was a great thing for the whole Willamette Valley. They would bring logs down, dump them in the Willamette River, raft them up, and take them clear down to Portland and up the Columbia River where the sawmills were. So it was really a good thing.
If anyone wants to know about Valsetz history, they can come here because the collection is vast.
Yes. and you really got it. Actually, it's better here than what it was in Portland, the way they had them set up.
Well, thank you, Ron. I really appreciate you talking to me today about Valsetz history.
Yeah.